learning community. Thank you. And we're delighted today to have Dr. Jeremy Hsu with us. He's going to talk about opening the door, student motivations, barriers, and experiences in STEM course office hours. Welcome, Jeremy. Thank you so much for being part of our community today.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Thanks for that kind introduction. Thank you to everyone at NIST for having me. And thank you for joining me on a Friday afternoon. I know it's the beginning of the year for many of us, right? For some beginning quarters or beginning of semesters. So I do appreciate all of you being here today. So let me go ahead and start my screen share. And we're going to talk about office hours today. I'm going to hit pause while the screen sharing starts. There we go. I'm going to talk about office hours today and going to draw upon some of my research about office hours and to have a conversation about how we can better engage students in STEM course office hours. And before I start, I want to acknowledge that I'm going to talk about a lot of our research, which has been truly collaborative, right? So I want to acknowledge an amazing team of people, both at my home institution, so at Chapman University in Orange County, California. So a bunch of students, collaborators, colleagues at Chapman, as well as a lot of really fantastic collaborators outside of Chapman as well. And you'll see me highlight a few of these people as we talk about some results in our session today. But I want to start with a quick discussion about office hours. And I'm going to try doing this by a show of hands. And so if your camera is on, you're welcome to physically raise your hand. If your camera is off, you're welcome to either turn on your camera or you can use the Zoom raise button feature. If you're driving, like some of you I know are driving, no worries. I will channel my Friday afternoon mental energy to get a sense of if you're raising your hand or not. So let's start by this show of hands. So first, how many of you went to a professor, so not a teaching assistant, an actual professor, the instructor's office hours when you were an undergraduate student? So let's do that by a show of hands. Okay, so I'm getting of the people with cameras on, maybe looks like the majority people without cameras on. We're getting a bunch, and then a few people saying never ever in chat. Some people saying raising their hands in chat as well. Okay, next question. Looking back, how many of you feel like you should have gone to more of them, or should have gone if you didn't go at all to your office hours as an undergraduate student? So let's do that by a show of hands again. Okay, we're seeing a lot of hands, more people off camera raising their hands. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Last question. Oh, Talitha's saying you don't recall that they were a thing at your university. Interesting. Okay. All right, last question. Looking back, how many of you feel like you knew what office hours were, right? That you knew what they're for, how to navigate them. That you felt really comfortable with office hours back when you were an undergraduate student. Okay, we got one person raising their thumb or giving me a thumbs up. Dalton's also raising his hand. All right, two people up, 3, 4, a couple more, but far fewer. Oh, and interesting, more people saying that term office hours wasn't used. Other people in chat, Tonya is saying, nope, no clue as a first-gen student. Todd, mostly not. Giant State University, professors far off. Yeah. So I think this little exercise shows that not everyone's going to office hours, and perhaps one of those barriers is that a lot of students might not know what they are or know how to navigate them. So why do we care then? Like, why is this an issue? Well, we know from a lot of past work that office hours support students' learning and likely has affective benefits, meaning kind of attitudinal benefits, things like increased interest in the course, things like increased confidence. We know that they're nearly ubiquitous, right? They're found nearly everywhere across colleges and universities in the US. But from that hand-raising activity we see, they're often what we consider part of the hidden curriculum, meaning the unwritten set of norms and rules that are often kind of implicit to navigate something, kind of knowing about what they are, knowing how they work. And there've been, before our work on office hours, relatively few studies done looking at STEM course office hours and looking at how to improve them. So with that in mind, I want to mention kind of an anecdote of how our work on office hours started, right? Because it was literally a water cooler conversation with colleagues. Remember, it was pre-COVID, maybe my second or third year of teaching, and we're chatting at the water cooler, and we're like, why doesn't anyone ever come to our office hours, right? They're empty. The students we want to come aren't coming, right? What's going on, right? And we started talking as colleagues about why some students come and why some students don't come. So what I want to do next is we're going to jump into some interactivity and we're going to open some breakout rooms. So let's see. I remember, okay, there we go. I'm saying back when we were doing online teaching, I was a pro at navigating everything on Zoom. It's now like I feel like I'm out of practice now. Okay, so I'm going to open up, let's say, five breakout rooms. I'm going to give everyone, let's say, a couple minutes there, and then we'll come back together and I'll ask for one or two groups or one or two volunteers to share one or two things you discussed. So again, the prompts, I'll type them in the chat. That way you can hang on to them during the breakout room. So why do you think your students come or not come to office hours? So your prompt is in the chat. We'll say a couple minutes, and then I'm going to open the breakout rooms. All right, so we'll come back together in probably 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. Now moving. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. There's a couple seconds until everyone is back. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had some good discussions within your groups and you met some new colleagues, some new friends here. Let's hear from maybe one, two, maybe three of you. Feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to type it in the chat. Feel free to like physically raise your hand or use the Zoom raise your hand feature if you'd like to share out. So tell me one thing you talked about why your students come or don't come. Trevor, was that a hand? I just saw.
That was actually just a grabbing my water
Oh,
bottle.
sorry.
But I
Okay.
will share what we talked about
Go
anyway.
for it. Okay.
So one thing that came up is students may just be intimidated to come to office hours and not feel like if they have a super specific question, if they don't know what they're going to say when they get there, they may not want to come.
Yeah. So
We
Trevor
also
said
talked
two
about
things.
students more generally just may not realize what office hours are for and how it might help them.
Okay. Yeah. Intimidated, not knowing what things are for. Yeah. Brandon, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, sure. So Christine and I had a great conversation, and she said something that I really resonated with, which was that students aren't coming to office hours in many cases to be it's not content driven. It's more like they want to do better in the course. I have a bad grade in the course. It's almost like I felt like I need to talk to the manager. I'm not happy with this outcome.
Uh,
You got to come fix my problems because I this is unacceptable.
okay, so very driven by content. You're kind of almost like transactional, like speak to the manager, that
Yeah.
analogy. Okay, yeah, Usha.
Hi, yeah, similar in the sense that students, especially first year students, I think are not. I hear this a lot, like I don't want to bother the professor, kind of thing, right? They think it's an in kind of an imposition to go to the time without realizing that that time is set aside for them. So that's something I bring up a lot in class, that this is the time for you to come, and it's also not if you only need help. It's also for setting up, some kind of a rapport or relationship with an instructor. And I bring this up a lot. If you ever need a recommendation letter, and they all do, all the students, when they're going to apply to anything, whether it's a summer scholarship, research scholarship, or, grad school application, whatever it is, everyone needs a recommendation. And the way you get a recommendation letter is by actually setting up some kind of a rapport with the instructor, not by saying, I took your class and I got an A. That's not a recommendation letter.
Right. Thank you for that, Usha. That actually segues really well because you're pointing out they might not recognize some of the benefits of office hours, so they might not come for that reason. So I want to start today then. Thank you for that. That was a great conversation, some great ideas there. I want to share one result from our initial study on office hours. And I'll put a link in the chat at the end of the session with a Google Doc link to all the papers we mentioned. And this first study, I want to acknowledge, was done in collaboration with two of my fantastic colleagues, Melissa Rowland Goldsmith and Elaine Sorts here at Chapman University. And what we wanted to look at, one of the areas we looked at is, right, what do students and instructors think about STEM course office hours, right? What do they perceive as the benefits? Why do some students come? Why do some students not come? And so we surveyed a bunch of students, and what you're going to see here is in light blue, the reasons that students provided for why they come or what they saw as the benefits of office hours. And I think this echoes what a lot of you said, right? Usha and Brandon, you both mentioned content, right? I think a couple others said that as well. But the majority of students here were citing, hey, office hours are good for content. To a lesser extent, students saying for getting help on homework, and then a whole host of other reasons there. But when we surveyed instructors, we asked them, what do you see as the benefits of office hours, right? Instructors see a different set of benefits. And I think, Usha, you were hinting at this idea that we as instructors recognize a broader set of benefits. And that's here in dark blue. And there's a couple areas I want to highlight. First, right, a lot of instructors said, hey, office hours are a great way for students to get to know us, for building that relationship, right? Far fewer students said that, right? We think we're more important for students than the students think we are in terms of office hour perceptions there, right? So faculty see that as a benefit, and far fewer students do. Likewise, notice how multiple faculty said, hey, office hours are a great time, a great space to develop students' study strategies, to chat with students about how to study, how to do well in the course, and for professional development. Things like how to get involved in a lab, how to find research opportunities, internships, to talk about careers. Yet not a single student wrote that, or not a single student recognized these as benefits when asked about office hours, right? So we're seeing a large disconnect between what students see and what instructors perceive as the benefits of office hours. So with that in mind, then, let's do a second activity. And I love the conversation in chat because Talitha, I see, is already giving us an idea of how we can reshape some strategies about communicating the benefits and norms of office hours, right? Because so far we've seen that faculty are seeing a larger set of benefits for office hours than students, which leads to this question of how can we as instructors better communicate the benefits of office hours and the norms, right? Some of you said in chat earlier, you were first-gen students. You had no idea what they were or how they worked, right? So go ahead and type in the chat. Don't press enter yet. We're going to do a chat waterfall, but I'll give everyone 30 seconds to a minute or so. Type in the chat, what ideas do you have about how we as instructors can better communicate the benefits and the norms, meaning what are office hours? How do office hours work for your course or your institution to your students? So give everyone 30 seconds and we'll hit enter all at once in 30 seconds or so. So go ahead and feel free to type it out. I know some of you are driving, so no worries. Please be safe if you are driving. We'll do another 15 seconds. Okay, if you're done typing, go ahead and press enter and let's see your ideas. All right, so I'm going to start going through. Feel free to keep typing and pressing enter if you're not done. Renaming office hours enthusiastic invitations. Yeah, like personal outreach, inviting students. Setting them up in office hours. Usha saying start early, keep repeating. Talitha saying first day of class talk. discussing what office hours are. Trevor, devoting a few minutes of time to explain. Pankaj, the clock outside the door of the office my advisor had. Pankaj, do you want to speak more to that? What did you mean by a clock outside the door of the office?
So my advisor had a clock in which, he could say that when I'm available, I'm not available. And
Hmm.
within that, the clock had different hands to say, hey, somebody's coming to meet up, or this is a time to give you assignment, and this is a time to come and have a short meeting.
Hmm.
So that was the way he used to communicate.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and then I see Rebecca and Lace both mentioned syllabus, Karen announcing themes, Ivy sharing with students about office hours, Dalton normalize attendance. Yeah. Doing think pair shares, Tanya is saying. I love these ideas. Make assessments that greatly benefit from feedback through office hours, Zoom office hours. Love the ideas. Yeah. So I want to share with you all two quotes from some interviews that my former undergraduate student, Gabby Dalber, and I did. This is part of our senior thesis, where we interviewed a bunch of students about their experiences in office hours and their perceptions in office hours. And one of these themes we looked at was how instructor communication would influence students, right? So a lot of you mentioned syllabus. I'll give you a few seconds to read this student's quote. And we can see that this student is crediting that syllabus with lowering kind of their fear of negative evaluation, right? It made it less intimidating, saying, I now know what they are. I now know I don't need to have a fully fledged question to come in, and it just feels more inviting, right? And this makes sense that syllabus language, what they're seeing before the term starts, before the course even starts, can shape what they think about office hours. And I see some of you mentioned syllabus language earlier. And in fact, we see Talitha, I think I highlighted this earlier, gave a great example of a welcoming syllabus statement there that can talk about what they are, what they're for, and some of their benefits. So I love that. Here's a second student quote. And again, I'll give you a few seconds. And we see this theme over and over. That students who said instructors who keep reminding them of it, it made a difference, right? It said, hey, we now know you actually want us there. You or don't feel like you're bothering us, right? Some of you said that earlier, that students might not come if they think that they're bothering you, right, as an instructor. And in fact, we saw this theme from multiple students who did not even go to office hours, but they said they trusted their instructor more or felt like their instructor had their best interest in mind if the instructor just kept reminding them throughout that semester, throughout that quarter, about office hours. So even if they don't go, it seems like we're getting positive impact about reminding students of office hours. So yeah, love the ideas, love the energy here in chat. Okay. Oh yeah, and then absolutely dogs. Yes. For those who just came in late, Brandon has shoot, I'm blanking on your dog's name, Brandon. What was it again?
It's Houdini.
Houdini. Thank you. Houdini made an appearance earlier on video. So, yes, pets and dogs can be a great incentive as well. Okay. So then, communication's one part. And I'm going to skip this part because we kind of looked at this with barriers already, because we kind of, in the open activity, just for the sake of time, looked at barriers. But I want to show you the flip side of this study when we ask students, why don't you come to office hours, right? And, ooh, chemistry themed stickers. Fantastic. So like before, you're going to see in light blue the responses that students gave of why they don't come. Right? The plurality of students said they don't come if they don't have questions. And then, secondly, after that, schedule conflict, right? Logistics like busyness, and then a whole host of other reasons after that. All right, let's do this actually, I'm going to do this interactively. It's Friday afternoon, can't speak. Interactively, type in the chat which of these ones do you think you would see the biggest disconnect between what instructors thought versus what students thought? Meaning, if there's a really high percentage of students answering that as a barrier, if instructors had a far lower percent, or vice versa, right? If students had a low percent and instructors had a high percent, which of these categories do you think had the biggest disconnect between students reporting their barriers and what instructors think are barriers for students coming to office hours? So I give you 10 seconds to make a prediction, type it in the chat, and then, oh, go ahead. Go ahead, it's Friday afternoon, go for it. Okay. A lot of people saying no questions, intimidation, busyness. So, okay, intimidation seems to be the #1 factor. Well, we're going to find that there's different perceptions by instructors. It's actually a little bit different than what a lot of you are predicting. First, right, the schedule conflict. So I see some of you, like Trevor and a couple others, predicted that, right? That fewer instructors recognize the many responsibilities that a lot of our students have between family, right, jobs, if they're working, extracurriculars, clubs, sports, all of that. That we as instructors aren't recognizing that to the same extent. And take a look at this one. That a lot of instructors ascribed negative kind of connotations to students who don't come. They're like, hey, students don't come because they're lazy. They're not motivated. They don't make the effort. Far fewer students reported that. Now, of course, there's a bias there, right? Far fewer students will likely say, I'm too lazy to go to office hours, right? So that's definitely part of this. But I think this result is really eye-opening that a lot of our colleagues, a lot of us, might be viewing students in this negative lens if they don't come to office hours, while students are reporting a lot more structural barriers to office hours. And also the fact that they don't come, they don't feel like there's a benefit, they don't have any questions, right? And I saw some of you earlier mentioned, hey, structure your course in a way where they have frequent formative assessments, frequent chances to check in that would lend itself to now getting help in office hours, finding out what they know, what they don't know, right, through those course activities. Yeah. And I love the conversation in chat. I'm seeing some people suggesting things like using your university software of finding out schedule conflicts. Absolutely. Right. Or if your course is small enough. I know colleagues do like a when to meet. If you're teaching a smaller upper division course, or if you just have a small course, you could poll your students. Absolutely. Cool. Let's take a look at one more kind of result to frame for the next 10-15 minutes. I want to make sure we have the last 10-15 minutes for open discussion, questions, and conversations as well. So we've looked at this idea of benefits and barriers. Well, what about this idea of, do they even know what they're for, right? Are students familiar with this idea of office hours? And I want to highlight that I'm going to show you some data that was done with Grace Hollick, who's an undergraduate student in my lab, as well as some fantastic collaborators at Chapman, Rebecca Green, and then you met Elaine and Melissa a little bit earlier. All right, so for this paper, for this study, what we did is we surveyed first-year STEM majors, and we followed them throughout their first year. And so we surveyed them at the very beginning of college, right? So in orientation and in the first week of classes. Then we surveyed them in the middle of their first year, and then again at the end of their first year. And one thing we did is we checked with them about their self-reported familiarity with office hours. We asked them, right, how familiar are you with this idea of office hours, this concept? Like, do you know what office hours are, right? And I'm going to challenge us to make a prediction here. So I'm going to open up a tool, the poll button. And where is that button? Polls, here we go. Polls, I'm going to launch the poll. And I'm going to say A is equal to 1, B is equal to 2, C is equal to 3, D is equal to 4, E is equal to 5. 5 is a student who says, I'm super duper familiar. 1 is the choice of someone says, I'm not familiar at all. So go ahead and make a prediction. First year students at the beginning of college, what do you think is the average level of students' familiarity with STEM course office hours at the very beginning of their college experience? And again, your choices are in chat. A is equal to 1, not familiar. E is 5, super duper familiar. And where do you think the average falls in? Okay, we have 10 responses so far. I'll give a couple more seconds. We're missing about half of you right now. Okay, you got 13 responses. Give another 10, 15 seconds. Okay, we're still seeing a few responses come in. Okay, looks like responses have trickled down. So I'm going to stop the poll and I'm going to share the results. Okay, so here's the results. You all, it looks like most of you think that students are super duper unfamiliar with this idea, right? The plurality, 47% said A, so not all familiar. About a third of you said, 3, semi-familiar, and then only one of you said 4, that they're kind of familiar. Well, the actual results, take a look here. In red is first year students. They're almost, it was like 3.7-ish. So they were actually more familiar with office hours, self-reporting that with those biases than we were expecting, and kind of more, they're self-reporting more familiarity than we as a group are predicting right now. Right? And in green, you're going to see the familiarity of students in their second year and above. And what we're going to see is that by the second survey, so by the end of that first term in college, the first semester in college, in the beginning of the second semester, the familiarity gap that exists when they started college now has closed. Now, take that with a grain of salt, self-reported, but we're going to see that that first semester is super important in shaping students' conceptions, in that our students are actually coming in semi-familiar with office hours, at least in the context of this one survey done at this one institution, right? So let me ask you this for your next activity. Let's do this as a chat waterfall for the sake of time. They're more familiar with office hours entering in college than we predicted. What factors do you think shape that? In other words, how do you think students reported hearing about office hours before they started college? And as they went through their first year of college, what factors do you think shaped their familiarity and perceptions of and experiences in office hours? So give everyone another 30 seconds to type in the chat, and then we'll come back together. We'll do a chat waterfall again in about 30 seconds. So again, type in the chat your responses. What factors shape students' perceptions and experiences of office hours? Do another 15 seconds. Okay, go ahead and press enter. All right, responses, keep them coming. I'm going to start reviewing them as they come in. Lacey is saying other students, media or social media. Pankaj, learning spaces within office hours, duration. Trevor saying lots of high school teachers held online office hours. Yeah, we'll come back to that. Absolutely. Usha saying also high school. Other students, Tonya saying, yeah, past experiences in office hours. Peers, let's see, peers, experiences in office hours. Yeah, from having them in high school. Talitha saying that. Yeah. Devin, onboarding, first year experiences, high school, grades, and peer influence. Ooh, love the responses there. So yeah, let me share with you a few common themes, and this is drawing upon a couple papers we have looking at it. So first, a lot of you hit the nail on the head when we said high school experiences. This surprised us because we did interviews and surveys, it was 2022, 2023, and at least for me, my high school never had office hours. That term was new to me in college. but a fair number of students reported office hour experiences in high school. And we found high school newsletters saying things like, oh, we're starting office hours during COVID online teaching, right? And a lot of schools seems to have kept that as a resource. And so they're coming in with these perceptions of office hours from high school, but as some of you point out, often are not accurate. For example, we had some students say, oh, our high school called them office hours, but they were a study hall. They just had an extra period that students were mandated to go to. And so when they heard office hours in college, they're like, oh, I'll go there to study. It's a study hall. Like, I'll just go there and do some work, which some instructors might welcome, but some instructors might not, right? That perception might differ. Other high schools used office hours as a mandatory resource for students struggling. They said, oh, students in these interviews are saying, hey, our high school mandated them. It was almost like a punishment. You were forced to go, you were forced to go if you didn't do well. Right? So again, driving these high school experiences, driving our students' perceptions of office hours. A lot of you in chat mentioned kind of intimidation or past experiences, right? That fear of negative evaluation, meaning concern about being judged by the instructor or their peers. So a lot of this is driven by past negative comments or by instructors' comments. How instructors framed it could lead to these students saying, I don't want to appear dumb, right? This theme was one that surprised me, but made sense the more we thought about it. We saw that a lot of students said that the more confused they are, the less likely they are to attend, right? They're like, hey, sometimes I'm so lost, I don't even know where to begin with asking a question, and thus I don't go. Right? That ties in with that fear of negative evaluation a little bit. They're concerned about being judged, and they're so lost that they don't know how to ask a question about it. And their perception is that they need to be able to formulate a quote unquote good question to, to succeed in office hours or to be able to go to office hours. So that really surprised us. But again, we're seeing students, the ones that would benefit the most from going, report feeling the least comfortable going. Next, a lot of you mentioned peers, so classmates, right? So can think about encouraging students to come in groups. And we saw the physical layout, the structure, right? The location. Are you doing this in your office, in a conference room, in a classroom? Can matter. And finally, student and instructor identities. I don't have time to get into that, but there were some really rich quotes from students and instructors reflecting on how their own identities shape their experiences inside and outside office hours. Yeah. So what does this all mean? Right, so I want to end today with just a quick kind of recap of 4 main categories of recommendations. And then I'll share with you the code, the QR code, as well as a link for these papers. And then let's have a general discussion on your ideas, on your experiences, and what you've done. But let me share with you first the 4 major categories of recommendations based on our work. Right, first, we've seen that from our work that a lot of students don't know the norms of office hours. And there's the disconnect between students and instructors on what they view as the benefits. So take time to go through that. Discuss those with your students. Share those with your students. Second, right, we see that fear of negative evaluation, that intimidation. Tell students that there's no such thing as a dumb question, that all questions are welcome. I tell my students they don't even need to have a question to come. That lowers that fear of negative evaluation, that they can come with a group of friends and just listen to other students' questions, right? This whole idea of, hey, you don't know what you don't know until you hear someone else ask about it, right? So taking steps to really lower that fear of negative evaluation. Third, taking steps to make office hours inclusive for everyone. Right, so thinking about the structure and layout, thinking about the time, and when you do them, and how that impacts commuter students, students with jobs, students with families, right? Thinking about the culture and atmosphere inside office hours. That's tying in with lowering the fear of negative evaluation as well. And finally, we talked about this at the beginning, thinking really carefully about communication, right? So meaning if your syllabus only states the times of office hours, really thinking about, hey, is there an opportunity to leverage your syllabus, to leverage your in-class time, to leverage your announcements, to explain the norms of office hours, to talk about what they are, how to navigate them, what the benefits are, and why they should go. And I'll highlight, I wrote an op-ed for Inside Higher Ed a few months ago that kind of summarizes this in a little bit more detail. And I'll just end that there's a QR code here that links to Google Doc that will link to this op-ed as well as the papers I cited today. And I'll also put the link in the chat if you want to view this on your computer that links to all of these papers as well as this op-ed there. And I think I set the permissions correctly, but please let me know if you can't access it. Onto it, it does link to those 4 papers that we briefly talked about as well as the op-ed here. So I'll keep it up for a few seconds and then I'll just end with a quick thank you. And then I would love to have a conversation in the last 14 minutes we have to hear about your ideas, your questions about what you do, about your challenges, your what you've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked for all of you, right? So just to end, right? Thank you all for being here. Thank you to all the collaborators, my lab group, instructors, students, and then NSF and then Seismic, the Sloan Equity and Inclusion in STEM introductory courses collaboration for supporting some of this work. So I'm going to stop sharing here so we can see each other. And then I will open the floor up to questions and then just general conversation and dialogue about your office hour experiences, what you do, what's worked, and what hasn't worked. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I'll start with, I see a question from Rebecca. So Rebecca asked from chat, what recommendations do you have about holding office hours in an office versus a classroom? Yeah, I'll say that I do my office hours, if possible, in a conference room. What I've found is that it lowers that kind of intimidation factor. It lowers that fear of negative evaluation. And I tell them, it's your time, it's your space, right? My office has my name on the door. A conference room is for all of us, gives them space to spread out. And I say, hey, this conference room, you can bring a group of friends versus my office isn't that big, right? So that's a limiting factor. And this accommodates more people. This also allows me to tell students, hey, you can come even if you don't have questions, just to listen to other students' questions. That's not as doable in an office setting because of space limitation and the way the office is set up, right? And so I really like using conference rooms for that. But I recognize that that might be a challenge depending on space. But what are other people's experiences? Do other people have creative solutions? What are other people's experiences with office space versus classrooms versus conference rooms? Would anyone like to volunteer?
I can share. I just got um, so I my previous position had a conference room right next to my office. So I would usually have people meet in the office and then move there, especially if we had extra people. And I thought that was very good because I was able to have larger group things and having more students in there helped with everybody being able to kind of contribute to things. It also meant I had a much larger whiteboard, so I was able to draw out big things on the board and then have people come back with pictures from that after they left. So that personally, I love having a conference room to do that in.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Maximilian. Usha's echoing that using conference rooms. Anyone else want to share? Yeah, Karen?
So what do you think of non-office hours? So digital asynchronous alternatives. So I have a form that says it's a study strategy feedback form. What are you doing now based on the study cycle I've told you to do over and over? And what might you change? And what do you want advice on? And another one that's just check in, tell me anything, and then discussion boards for content. Are those valid alternatives, or am I fooling myself?
No, I mean, I think they're all great ideas. I think depending on how you define office hours, they might not be considered office hours, right? They might just be pedagogical tools. But I think this idea of structure, right? So if you haven't heard that term structure, it's this idea of adding in more checkpoints, adding in more formative assessments, adding in kind of moving away from the one midterm, one exam, 50% of your grade on each model, right? The more structure we have, the more that students can take ownership over their learning, right? The more that students can reflect on their own learning and identify areas of growth, right? What they know and what they don't know. That what we call metacognition. And so I think a lot of what you're suggesting, Karen, is similar to that, right? Tools to help prompt that reflection, prompt that metacognition. I know that some colleagues have also done asynchronous chats of like, oh, if you can't make it in the office hours, we'll have a Slack or to a lesser extent Discord, but I think mostly Slack as a way to ask questions. Or you mentioned discussion boards, Piazzas, right? So I know that's a common software. Those are all venues for helping provide alternate ways for students to connect that have advantages and also, of course, some disadvantages compared to more traditional office hours. But absolutely. Thanks for that, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let me get to the next question on there. So I'm scrolling back to make sure I got all the questions. So that was Rebecca. Brandon is asking, how do you get students to come to office hours before they realize they need help? Often when they finally show up, it's too late. Yeah, that's a great question. I found that it goes about I found success lowering that fear of negative evaluation and explaining the benefits, right? And part of that is telling students office hours are for everyone. They're space for everyone, no matter how well you're doing, and to encourage that early on to be like, come in and come see me. Or if you're just not sure, want to clarify something, or if you just want to run through a concept with me again, right? I often love telling students, hey, I use a conference room. You can come in week 1 and work on your problem set. No questions needed. That way, if you have a question, I'm right there. If you don't have a question, I'll say hi, check in with you, and then I'll promptly ignore you, right? I'll get to know them, of course, but I tell them this could be your space to study. And again, that way, something pops up, I'm right there. So I think really taking steps to kind of go through the benefits, talking about the norms, encouraging that early on. I also then build in a lot of structure, right? That formative assessments we talk about. Because a lot of students think they don't have questions and therefore they don't go to office hours until their first exam, right? Or until their first quiz. Because when they get it back, they're like, oh shoot, I thought I knew mitosis, but I don't actually understand mitosis when they get their exam back. Right. So thinking about what we do in class, building in more of those formative assessments there. Yeah. Are there other ideas for getting students in early that people want to share?
Oh, I just mentioned one of my colleagues gives extra credit, tells students in a large class that they hope that every student will come to at least one office hour, and that they, I think, kind of spin it as, it's a chance for me to get to know you. And somebody in our breakout group also mentioned about like writing letters of rec, how again it's transactional, but like, I can't write a letter of rec for you if I've never seen you before, like if I've never actually interacted with you. And so I don't know if that's a spin or if that's an enticement. Is just, just it gives me a chance to talk to you, or gives us a chance to chat. Um, but yeah, I don't know about, again, I personally don't give extra credit for coming to office hours, but I was just saying that somebody does that. But just, yeah, encouraging them, like, come at least once just to say hello. Uh, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I don't either for extra credit. It is something that, I know is done, that some colleagues do, right? I've shied away from doing that for kind of 2 reasons. One is kind of the equity reason of if someone really can't make any one of them, and this might depend on your class size, how often you offer office hours, but if someone's working as family, that could be an equity reason. And then second, we know that students with more intrinsic motivation tend to do better than extrinsic motivation, meaning motivation of external things, of external awards versus doing it for the pure enjoyment, right? And so extrinsic motivation, students tend to, if you're saying, I'll get extra credit, I'll come once, and then the next class doesn't offer extra credit, it might potentially, and there's no empirical evidence on this, of course, but it might backfire. And that's part of the reason I have shied away from that. But, that is definitely one. And then I see Trevor, just mentioned the scheduling conflicts issue as well on there. But yeah, any other ideas people want to mention for getting students in early in the term?
I think one of the things that I also have done is just, and somebody mentioned this in the chat earlier, is just kind of on your first day of class, tips for success. So here are students who have taken this class before, and here are their tips for success. And they say, come to office hours because it will be helpful, or, just so it's not just me telling you, but it's former students are
Right.
giving this advice directly to you.
I love that. And that's one thing that my undergrad did in our student evaluations of teaching. They made this question public to all students. It said, what advice would you give the future students of the class? And that would be public. And our institution doesn't ask that, but I've just asked them that and said, I'm going to share your responses anonymously. And it's always fun to share those because past students, as you mentioned, Brenda, will take those seriously. Like literally my peers last semester said, go to office hours, right? Or like take the problem set seriously, or do this or do that. And that, gets them thinking, and I think can carry a lot of weight. Thanks. All right. We've got 4 minutes left. Let's see if I can answer one or two more questions here before we call it a Friday afternoon. Okay. Pankaj asks, do you also plan to explore how students from different disciplines of science have different perceptions about office hours? Yeah, that's a great question, Pankaj. We have not done that work. Our work has primarily been in the context of biology courses and chemistry courses. But yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know. I've never done that. And you're right that there might be cultural, like discipline-based cultural differences. Go ahead, Pankaj.
Yeah, I think there might be differences in the content, the context they want to come to the office hours, maybe because of, biology being more in depth and width in the content, chemistry being, content with maths, so maybe the interdisciplinary nature of the content may think them to come to office hours for different purposes. It could be, content, it could be culture, it could be research they want to do where they want to utilize different sciences together. So the questions might be different. The duration of office hours may be different.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to write that down. Yeah, I like that idea. Cool. All right, then I'll see if we can squeeze in one more question. So Maximilian's asking, in the study where students rated their familiarity, did you ask the students in higher years to reflect on how their understanding of office hours changed over time? We did not. I really love that idea. We did not. What we did was instead it was a longitudinal sampling across that year. So we were able to see kind of what changed across that 1 year, but not at that more macro level, right? Not at the like, here's a 4th-year student saying, here's what they thought. Some of the interviews we've done, with students across institutions, they've reflected on that. So it's been a question we've asked in that interview, but it's not something we've done at a systematic level in terms of the surveys there.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I was curious about that too, because I think on the initial surveys, students had rated themselves at like a 3 out of 4, I think. And so if you're looking to see change over time, if they're already rating themselves as knowing everything, then yeah, it's one of those issues with Likert scale surveys where people, on average, people think that they're in the top
Right.
top rankings of the score. Then if they change, are they going from a 3 to a 4? Or are they actually going from a 1 to a 4? Yeah.
Right. But yeah, and from the interviews, I'll share that, and we saw this in the slides that, a lot of past experiences in office hours shape their current experiences, unsurprisingly, right? Someone who had a negative experience in one office hours was now like, it made me nervous about going to another one, versus if they had a really good experience, they're more likely to come back to another course office hours. So their familiarity, of course, scales with their own experiences as they progress throughout college.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we've got 1 minute. Any last comments, questions, or feedback before we call it a day with our Friday afternoon learning community?
I'm just gonna
Thank you.
jump in. Oh, sorry, I'm just gonna jump in here with a quick announcement for NIST. So I just want to tell all of you, thank you so much for coming. And those of you that are regulars to our NIST Falcon, we will not be having a session on October 3rd, but instead it will be on October 10th. So if you're used to marking it on your calendar as a certain schedule, you will be, of course, you'll be getting the email about it, but just wanted to let everyone know that our next NIST Falcon session will be with Dr. Shannon Berman on October 10th. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Jeremy, for being here. I'm sure if anybody still has a few questions, we can stay for a couple minutes.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's see. Marie, if you want to be added to the distribution list, there should be a link. I'm gonna Marie, I'm gonna just put my email in the chat. Just email me and I'll make sure you get on the list. Thank you.
Now I'm going to stop the recording as well right now.
Perfect.